We're live. Episode number 3 of the Swodcast. I just drove home. I was helping my lady and her sister move out of their apartment. I was on U-Haul duty today. Just loading that sucker up. Only took about better part of 2 hours or so, but a little in and out mission like junior year prom, if you know what I'm saying. No, it's only a joke, but yeah, I was driving home and I was kind of thinking of how I've never voted in an election of any kind, and I probably never will. And I just want to come out hot and heavy and maybe get a clickbait title here and just let's call it what it is. Chat. America's a vassal, just a puppet state of the military-industrial complex overseas. An expansion of the colonial imperial times. And ever since the great John Fitzgerald Kennedy was assassinated in broad daylight on American soil in front of American citizens, and then we were all continuously lied to about that, I firmly believe that's the day that at least the United States American democracy died. I think we've been living in a classist, state since then. There's an old joke I saw on the internet. It's an old Soviet joke, and KGB and CIA agent both board a plane together somewhere in Europe, just for the sake of the story. Let's say they're flying from Moscow to Paris, and the CIA agent sits down and he goes, "So, if you don't mind me asking, what do you do for work?" And the Soviet guy turns to him and says, "I work for the state. I'm a KGB agent." And the guy says, "Oh, no way, I'm a CIA officer." So they get to talking, and they talk about how their jobs are kind of similar but different at the same time. And the American goes, "Oh, well, you at least got to admit, as a KGB officer, you guys have a really good state propaganda machine." And the KGB officer goes, "Yes, yes, that's true, but as an American, you have to admit that your propaganda is very strong in the West, too." And the CIA agent goes, "What? What propaganda?" And just an old Soviet tale, just kind of a chuckle at how we're kind of blind or oblivious, and a bit of the Western hubris to the propaganda machine that's pumped out in front of us. Let's start there, actually. Why not? How about Operation is it Bluebird, Blue Jay, Bluebird, Bluebird, Operation Bluebird, CIA. Let's get a little specific, and I guess actually, let's go. What news magazine outlets did they buy? Horrible spelling, but I mean, I'm not here for my spelling, chat. Just here to speed and efficiency. Operation Mockingbird, that's what it was. Let me switch that up so we've got that right. To Kill a Mockingbird. How about To Kill Operation Mockingbird? Let's get into this. Why am I sketched out by the CIA? Why am I sketched out? Why am I making these bold claims that we've been corrupted since the Kennedy assassination? Well, CIA, I guess, didn't purchase these media companies. What they did do is strategically place agents all around major media outlets, including, as we can see here, the New York Times. Ever heard of them? CBS. We got Newsweek, the Washington Post, which, I mean, let's be real, guys. If you're one of these people still reading these days, you're absolutely cooked, as the kids are saying. No, I'm playing. I punch some stuff into my news app every now and then, try to read some articles or look at some stuff, but like anything, I just take it with a grain of salt. I honestly feel like if you're sitting around reading stuff still these days, there's got to be a better way to get your news other than the Washington Post and CBS. I'm not talking down on reading as much as I am maybe these outlets, but again, not to say that you can't get good information from these. My main point is I don't think I'm breaking the ground or completely shocking anybody or breaking down the third wall and giving anybody brand new news that some of the mainstream media outlets are either have some intent or whatever behind their stories. Obviously, we know right and left bias. Who's funding these guys? We've kind of gotten into that stuff, but really peeling the layers back. Operation Mockingbird. Let's click down into the wiki. Maybe we can get into some of this stuff. But this is during the Cold War. The family jewels, we'll have to get into that as well. That's a pretty sketchy document. Um, Essentially, and here we go, American news organizations for propaganda purposes. So, I mean, you want to talk about why does this crazy guy, Secret Agent Swood, think that the moon landing was faked? Don't necessarily think that that's an impossible mission, that we didn't get there. As an American student my whole life, I was told that the single greatest feat in American and mankind history was going to the moon, putting man on the moon. At least top 3, right? Probably up there with defeating the Nazis. That happened right around the same time. What they failed to tell you is who got the motherfuckers on the moon. Wernher von Braun. Let's skip over to that for a second. We're talking about the propaganda machine. We're talking about why would the CIA want to lie to the American public, the American citizens in the 1960s, the late 1950s, early 1970s. At the time, they're probably not thinking, this jackwad kid's going to be able to type in a bunch of whatever on his laptop and show people, I guess it's this one, show people his, some kind of videos of the moon landing or whatever. They're like, oh, we'll show the moon landing once a year on ABC. We've got 3 channels. We got a few radio stations. Allegedly, the computers that put the astronauts on the moon, we have the same computing power in our smartphones to the day. Better computing power, if I understand that correctly. So, Wernher von Braun, head of the Apollo missions, he worked on, was it the Saturn rocket? He was a high-ranking Nazi official. He was in charge of a work factory. It's a very loose term. He was in charge of a work factory that hung the 3 slowest workers as kind of a threat and signal to the other workers that this is what happens to the slowest workers. So the Saturn V2 rocket is what he was working on for Hitler. And then he came over and, what do you know, it was the V2 rocket for Hitler. And then he came to us, Walt Disney shout out there, and started to work for NASA. Yep, this guy started NASA. So his group then assimilated into NASA, where he served as the director of newly formed Marshall Space Flight Center. So the Saturn V Superlift Heavy Launch Vehicle or whatever. This is what was shot into space for the Apollo spacecraft missions. So let's rewind a little bit. Why are we talking about this? Me, an American student growing up, the single greatest American feat of all time was done by who? Oh, well, it was done by Nazis, who was also this single most evil, corrupt organization ever. And by the way, who oversaw all of these? Also as an American student, you can probably guess there's one super corrupt politician from the past, the biggest scandal in American political history, other than the Kennedy assassination, in my opinion. And this isn't my opinion. Again, this is just what the textbooks teach us. Richard Nixon. Yes, that guy, the 37th president. So let's see who, as president of USA, oversaw, how do you spell oversaw? Oversight of Apollo missions. And again, don't critique me for my spelling here. I'm painfully dyslexic. Initiated by Kennedy, Lyndon B. Johnson, who stepped in after the assassination. And then who was around when all of this was actually going off? When they were actually shooting rockets into space, who actually oversaw all of the Apollo missions where we were in deep orbit, we were going to the moon? Well, that was Richard Nixon. So, again, rewinding a little bit, the single greatest human achievement of all time, of all of mankind, technologically, landing on the moon, was done by who? Well, the most corrupt president of all time teamed up with Wernher von Braun, one of Hitler's top Nazi scientists, and they got together and started NASA, and then shot a bunch of shit into space, which no one had ever done before, in the middle of the Cold War, with a space race against communism and the threat of the Red Scare in the East. Those are the people that got us on the moon. And that's not really how it's taught to you. So, again, just peeling back a little bit, understanding history in some particular chunks. It's like, yeah, I mean, when you have an understanding of, yeah, the greatest thing that ever happened technologically was done by the Americans. Well, actually, it was done by Nazis who teamed up with Richard Nixon, who was allegedly the most corrupt political scandal president of all time who got impeached. So, yeah, I'm crazy for thinking that there might have been some lying, some propaganda. Again, I'm not saying this is an impossible mission, but is there a benefit to fake and make sure that we have perfect images? Well, actually, we know they did that. We know that happened. The double negative, I think it was Time magazine, maybe it was Rolling Stones, I forget. Moon landing fake picture. So somebody actually got caught faking a picture here. And again, my goal here is not to walk away from this, denying the moon landing. It's to look at the propaganda machine and understand maybe what we're looking at, why the stories are being told the way that they're being told, and maybe combing over and glossing over some, embarrassing details, if you will, of maybe how we got to the moon. Wernher von Braun, this guy's a fucking Nazi. I mean, we're looking at a Nazi. There's no way around it. Known for engineering, yeah, okay. Let's Wernher von Braun. See if we can get just a little bit more of his. Joined the Nazi Party in 1937. Oh, good, an early adopter. Became an officer of the SS in 1940. He was the Sturmbannführer, so he was a major. And I did not take German, but a few of my friends did, so I can call them the big guns if we need some better pronunciation here. But I think you guys are getting the gist. V2 ballistic missiles for the military. So, I mean, nothing to sneeze at here. What work? It's like a prison camp. I mean, to call it a work factory is insane, but you're not in charge of a concentration camp or factory. Oh, here it is. Army Research Center. Forced laborers. I mean, I've read stories and articles that were when this guy walked in the room where all the laborers were working, that they weren't even allowed to look at him. They all had to turn around the other way, and anybody that would make eye contact with him would get reprimanded. Did they hang slow workers? Crime against humanity. Let's see what happened here. Yes, the SS guards publicly hang slow workers. So, I mean, there we have it. After 2 or 3 simple Google searches, Wernher von Braun, where he worked, he oversaw the V2 missile projects, which were done in this underground place, which, yes, SS guards hung the slowest workers. So, more than 200 inmates were hung. Over 20,000 prisoners died from starvation. The camps, I mean, come on. So yeah, there we have it, guys. That's how we got to the moon, and just put a bow on it and nothing to sneeze at, right? And he teamed up with this guy, Richard Nixon. Let's just, is Nixon considered corrupt historically? Yes, Richard Nixon is widely considered a historically corrupt politician with the Watergate. So I mean, yeah. Those people teamed up, and I have no reason to question any of their prior past work, right, guys? We have no reason to question what Richard Nixon or the Nazis were up to, especially people that committed crimes against humanity at that. So, again, the publication that posted the fake picture, why would they want this stuff faked? We can even get into fake moon rocks that were given to either Holland or the Dutch Prime Minister. We'll get into that after this. Apollo 11 moon landing was real, and viral claims of fake pictures typically con members interpret whatever. Get to the juice, man. Somebody posted an image. And again, yeah, it's not evidence that it was fake, but somebody essentially was trying to get a better version of the astronauts on the moon, and they took either something from a practice run or something that was recorded and just kind of blacked out the back. And people look at that now and they're like, obviously people want to, you know, to say there was no motive at all is just nonsense. Anyways, we don't need to get into all of this. Let's go. Petrified. Whoops. All right. Dutch Prime Minister Wilhelm Drees received a small rock from the U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands. This actually then turned out to be just petrified wood. So, again, classic mix-up. You know, you've got your real moon rocks and your fake prop moon rocks just sitting right next to each other. My whole question is, why is there a mix-up? Why would you happen to... Why is there even a piece of petrified wood mixed up as a moon rock? Why does that exist? Why does a fake moon rock exist at all? Granted, who gives a fuck about the Dutch? Let's be real. The Dutch Indies Company, we'll save that for a different video. We want to talk about some crimes against humanity. Seriously, just some of the, yeah. No shade on the Dutch. There's blood on everybody's hands historically, but again, we're going over there. We're giving the Dutch something. We're not going to give them the freaking rocket itself. We're going to give them a little something. We'll give them a moon rock, sure, but obviously we give them a fake one. I'm not against giving, these European fucking posts, every issue in history can be boiled down to the British Queen and King. I'm using air quotes at the moment, so to give that to a Dutch Prime Minister, a fake rock, I have no issue with that. My issue is, why do we have a fake moon rock? All this being said, it's just like, what are the times we're living in here? What happened after that Kennedy assassination? Who came into power? Why did they come into power? Unpacking this a little more, why I don't vote. I'm a resident and citizen of the great state of Illinois, the land of Lincoln. It's going to be a blue state every year. Cook County, the city of Chicago, is going to swing the state. My vote is effectively meaningless, especially when it comes to the Electoral College and everything. So in presidential elections, there's next to no incentive for my vote. I know it doesn't matter. And it's like, oh, well, with that mindset, it's like, okay, yeah. Also, deeper than that, I have no interest in voting. I think that there are people sitting in military bunkers, these unelected officials who, are part of the alt-right-wing plot that killed Kennedy. Talking about the Red Scare, talking about why is there an incentive to lie. My dad grew up with a nuclear bunker in his basement. His father served in World War II. There is a stairwell deep into a cement, 2.5 foot thick cement bunker with bunk beds and everything. With, at the time, he was from the Quad Cities, Illinois, which, not necessarily a hot hub for weakening or crippling the U.S. economy. And you had people there genuinely terrified that at any moment, there'd just be air raids from the Soviets. So the Red Scare is a very real thing. Average American citizens, a lot of young men that served, that came back from the wars and started families. My grandfather was involved in the bombing of Dresden. Let's look up the bombing of Dresden. I'm pretty sure it's the single largest air operation that ever happened. And I believe the Royal Aircraft of the Brits kind of went in first. They thought the town would be evacuated, the city would be evacuated. It wasn't. And they just absolutely flattened the place. And then the Americans came in after that. Heavily civilian casualties, a massive firestorm, intense historical debate. So you're talking about people that were seriously saw fascism, communism, Japanese attacks at Pearl Harbor. My grandfather and his brothers enlisted the day after Pearl Harbor. So just the context of the times people were dealing with. The Red Scare is a very real thing. We've got people genuinely thinking that the Soviets are going to come over at any moment. Why not strum up a lie. So yeah, we've got all those guys. Kennedy's saying, let's do a joint mission to the moon with the Soviets. Let's do peace talks in the Middle East with Egypt and the nuclear races, with, I believe, Iran, Israel. We can I don't want to get demonetized this earlier. We can get to Kennedy's issues with AIPAC and Israel and their nuclear programs later, but all this was very real. Sipping my coffee there. Take a little blinker break. Gather my thoughts. I'm not encouraging other people not to vote, but I am to act like, I feel like there's some quote where it's like, if we actually let the people vote every year. What's the quote where it's like, if we actually let the people vote, we would... I mean, I'm butchering the quote. Some politician said this about democracy. Yeah, here we go. If voting made a difference, it actually let us do it. It's just stuff along these lines where it's like, I don't know, guys. When they're pulling the trigger to make sure Kenny is shot and killed so we don't, again, those guys really thought they were saving America. The people that the CIA, the far right wing plot to conserve the American borders and, the arms race, the culture race, the political and economic race against communism. Those guys genuinely thought that Kennedy was a threat to what the American establishment had built and stood for. So taking him out was essentially the best thing to do. Operation Mongoose. I mean, RFK basically gave the CIA the green light to do, by any means necessary, get into Cuba and kill Castro. There were some insane plans like injecting him with, what's the opposite of testosterone? I'm just so juiced with it, I can't even think of the opposite of it. What was the opposite of testosterone? Anyways, they wanted to shoot that kind of stuff into him. Estrogen. They wanted to shoot him with estrogen so his hair would fall out and he'd kind of look skinny fat and he'd look less masculine. I mean, they had the craziest plans. They wanted to give poison to his mistress. RFK gave these guys, and JFK, gave these guys the green light to basically, by any means necessary, get in there, take care of this stuff. So you want to get poison down there. How are you going to get poison down there? Operation Mongoose. Did the CIA hire the mob to smuggle drugs? Mafia hitman Johnny Roselli to kill Castro. So he was hired for that. Remove Cuban government from the power, blah, blah. So, I mean, we're talking about political assassinations. That's how terrified we are of communism at this time as a country. I guess Eisenhower signed off on this first, is what it's saying. I mean, this stuff's intense. Using print and radio mediums to broadcast anti-Castro messages. The Bay of Pigs. Ah, yes. Let's talk about false flags. That's another thing I wanted to get into. Let's talk about the Bay of Pigs. Let's talk about Operation Northwoods. What is Operation Northwoods? You might be saying, okay, you're saying far right wing. You're saying there's these politicians, there's these military DOJ people. It's just like a vague term that you're using. How about you pull up some hard evidence of something where they actually were acting irrationally? Perfect. Let's talk about my favorite document in American history. Operation Northwoods, not to be confused with Southwoods. Sotwood, as the Russians translated for the French on my passport when I flew from Moscow to Paris at the age of 1.5. Operation Northwoods was a 1962 proposed U.S. Department of Defense false flag plan. So let me read that again. The U.S. Department of Defense propose a false flag operation to stage false terrorist attacks, blame Cuba, and justify military invasion of the Cuban island. This was put on President Kennedy's desk. He said, "This is absolutely obnoxious." This involved painting a U.S. jetliner, controlling it as a drone, pre-recording distress signals, sending them back, playing them to the public, and saying, "Oh, help, help, the Cubans are going to shoot us down." This would look like a commercial jetliner, a bunch of students who was supposed to be flying down to Cuba. They would land in a different airfield, and then this one would be shot down as a drone. And they'd say, "Look, the Cubans, they shot us down as an act of terrorism. We need to get involved." They would also lob mortars into military bases in Cuba. They would arm Cuban friendlies. I believe there were staged attacks for D.C. and Miami as well. This is insanity. This was signed and put on Kennedy's desk. So yeah, this is the group of people that we're talking about that are interacting with Kennedy through his short presidency. This is a guy who's comes from a very wealthy family, a very powerful family. He's never lost an election in his life. He has a very short political career. He's wrote one or two pretty successful books already. I believe I can look that up as well. Let me get into... I think it was maybe How England Slept. Why England Slept, a 1940 best-selling book by JFK. So, I mean, in the 40s, Kennedy had a successful military career in his own right. His ship was shot down in somewhere between Hawaii and Japan, I believe. I don't know where exactly, which island he was serving on. Obviously, we've all learned about island hopping and the different military bases and strategic maneuvering that was done throughout the war after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So that obviously got us involved in some naval warfare. Kennedy was, let me just look it up. Kennedy was serving, I forget the name of the ship. His ship was torpedoed in half by a Japanese attack ship, warship. He already had a bad back. Round up his crew in the middle of the night amongst the wreckage, put a injured crew member's life jacket straps, clinched them in his teeth, swam to a nearby island, found some local islanders, sketched into his coordinates where they had crashed and been attacked, gave it to the islander on this coconut that was on the island. The islander takes the coconut back to a U.S. military base camp because the islander is a little more familiar, knows his way around the island. This guy gets messaging back to camp. They come and save Kennedy and his crew. I mean, just a totally crazy story. Kennedy service in Navy. How do you spell torpedoed? In half. Saved. Just pulling up some of that stuff so you guys can read it for yourself and not just hear me regurgitate some bad information. So John Fitzgerald Kennedy, the man we're talking about here, before he became president and never got into office at all, his older brother was kind of like the golden child. He was a broad, strong guy. I believe he played rugby at the University of Harvard. Kennedy was going to go to Princeton. Kennedy's dad was kind of like, "You should be more like your brother. Of course, your brother went to Harvard, blah, blah, blah." So that's kind of why Kennedy switched last second, I believe, to go to Harvard as well. Kennedy wants to be like his older brother. His older brother is this big, strong, athletic guy. Kennedy has Addison's disease. So growing up, he's a scrawnier, sickly, weak-looking guy. He's skin and bone, had a hard time, developing, putting on weight, and had a bad back, had bad joints. So already wore a back brace. That was kind of known while he was going around polling, kind of trying to get votes in Massachusetts. He was knocking on doors and had a hard time walking around because of this bad back after the service as well. So Kennedy actually kind of had to have his dad intervene. He failed a few medical, I don't know what you'd kind of call that, tests or like a physical for the Navy. Failed a few. His father had to get involved in kind of the opposite of Trump. I believe Trump lied about his whatever so he could dodge the draft or dodge the military service. Kennedy got his dad involved so he could get involved and serve. And again, didn't necessarily get some cushy desk job. He was torpedoed and had his P-10-109 destroyed in half. Japanese destroyer, the Amagiri. That's not racist, that's just a pronunciation. He was down in the Solomon Islands. For clarification for anybody that might want to look into this a little bit deeper. The water also caught on fire, which I was a little unaware of that fact, but I guess with the fuel spillage amongst the wreckage, there's some severe burns. So the crewman, McMahon, is the man who could not swim, and I guess that was due to the burns. So towed the man by his teeth, threw the life jacket straps in his mouth, swam him back. I mean, by the time Kennedy had come back and wanted to start his young political career, this was already a story that they were putting in papers and circulating, young hero. Obviously this was a big deal and during the World War and whatnot. Also fighting against the Japanese who had famously attacked Pearl Harbor. So, yeah. How the coconut message worked. So yeah, you can know I wasn't lying about the coconut. Why are we talking about Kennedy? How did we get here? What are we talking about? Operation Northwoods. Staging fake attacks. Kennedy serves in the military. I guess that's just a little bit on Kennedy and his background. I can't even remember why I went down that rabbit hole, but the more you know, right? The more you know. But Kennedy's not no bitch, I guess all that being said. He ain't no baby back bitch. This guy served. Yeah, I mean, we need a guy like Kennedy or Lincoln in office. I don't want to get too deep into that, but, pointing out the fact again that, let me just look that up real quick. And I'm not, this is no anti-whatever, but, yeah, Trump avoided the Vietnam draft through 5 official deferment. So bone spurs. Yeah, he had bone spurs. Kennedy had Addison's disease and went out of his way to make sure that he wouldn't fail a physical again so he could serve, and then subsequently furthered his lifelong injuries or discomfort, if you will. Here's a little tidbit. Always wore the back brace, right? Because of this Addison's disease, the back issues and whatnot. It was obviously perpetuated by this crash. When he was shot in the throat, and you kind of see him bending over on the Zapruder film, a lot of people believe he would have been able to duck or completely get under kind of deeper into the cabin, but he always wore that back brace, and it kind of kept him upright, so he wasn't able to bend at the waist as well, and that's kind of why he stayed upright. Some people think that made him an easier target after the first shot kind of wasn't as lethal as ultimately, the second shot that landed. Regardless, Operation Northwoods. I mean, I remember talking to my dad about this stuff and being like, you don't think they would put something like this in front of President Bush and say, hey, look, a few American citizens, die here, but think of all the lives we're going to save. We have, look at this drive we've got. We've got a drive from bin Laden. It's got 19 plans. If 10% of these hit, if 1 or 2 of these attacks hit, the death toll will be double of the false flag that we're going to pull off. And it's not only going to, get us involved and justify military intervention of the public and boost your approval rating and everything, but economically we'll be able to get involved, blah, 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 blah. I mean, to say that this hasn't happened or wouldn't happen to a president, we know that it absolutely has happened. We know that these pitches happen, that these plans are put together, that at the trade-off of innocent American civilian lives, they would rather the general justification of war be pushed through. And if you think, oh, okay, that's a bit of a stretch, let's click into the document. Let's click into the official document. And let's read the very top line. And justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba. That's the top line of this document. The subject line, justification for military intervention in Cuba. I mean, the Joint Chiefs of Staff is proposing this to the president. This will be the last thing I cover today. This thing gets me fired up, man. We are a puppet state. I don't know who we're controlled by. I'm not trying to get anybody on my side or to think the way I think. That's the last thing I want. I just want other people to be aware of these corners of history that do exist and are politely combed over and polished and buffed out of the history books. Not one of these things is mentioned. The Bay of Pigs is hardly mentioned. Operation Northwoods sure as shit is not mentioned. Warner von Braun, the moon landings, Nixon, Nazis pairing up with the most corrupt political, figure in American, whatever. If you want to go by that whole story, some blacked out bullshit. That's what the CIA does best. As requested by the Chief of Operations Cuba Project, the Joint Chiefs of Staff are here to indicate a brief but precise description of, let's see here. Okay. So facts bearing on the problem, discussion. This is a memorandum, blah, blah, blah. Conclusion. The suggested courses of action dependent on closure A. However, preliminaries. Okay. I want to get to the part where it's like includes but is not limited to. Specific ultimate objective, which would provide adequate justification for U.S. military intervention. So again, they're really harping on, we want to make sure that this is justified to get involved in Cuba. All right, here we go. Since it would seem desirable to use legitimate provocation as the basis for U.S. military intervention in Cuba, a cover and detection plan to include requisite preliminary actions such as have been developed in response to Task 33C. These could be executed as the initial effort to provoke the Cuban reactions. So let's go poke the bear. Talk about false flags. October 7th. Let's talk about false flags. October 7th. Being willingly negligent is also a false flag. Knowing that there's a plan, being willingly negligent and allowing things to go through is also a false flag. I'm just going to put that out there and in the minds of the public. A series of well-coordinated incidents will be planned to take place in and around Guantanamo to give genuine appearance of being done by the hostile Cuban forces. So we're trying to give off an illusion to genuinely convince people of something, to genuinely appear as so to the naked eye through our propaganda machine, which, by the way, we have CIA agents through all of the massive media outlets, as I just listed a few, like CBS, the Washington Post, or whatever. Let's start some rumors. Let's land friendly Cubans in uniforms over the fence. There must be a nice little, industry phrasing to stage an attack on a base, capture some Cuban friendlies, start riots, blow up ammunition inside the base and start fires, burn aircraft on airbase, parentheses, sabotage, thanks, couldn't have figured that out myself, lob mortar shells. You can rewind the video, I said that from memory, that is burned in my memory. Let's just lob mortar shells from the outside into the base, just to get some damage installations. Capture assault teams, capture militia groups, sabotage the ships in harbor, even sink a ship near a harbor, conduct funerals for mock victims. Fake funerals for fake victims that don't exist, for a false flag attack that shouldn't have and didn't happen. Is this not ridiculous? Does this not fire you guys up? Conduct funerals for mock victims. Right here, section 11. My dog's getting freaked out. PJ, I'm not mad at you. I'm mad at the system, damn it. I'm going to start talking like Alex Jones, and maybe the public will listen to me a little more. The United States would respond by executed offensive operations to secure the water and power supplies, destroy artillery. Just go in there and wipe them out. Remember the main incident. Remember the main incident. Remember the main incident. Another little corner of history you can look into. We could blow up a U.S. ship in Guantanamo Bay and blame Cuba. Just a nice plain sentence at the top there. Why read all this nonsense? Just go down to bullet 3, subject A. Let's just blow up a fucking ship in Guantanamo Bay and just blame the Cubans. I mean, I could have thought of that in fourth grade. I mean, again, these are the same people that got their panties in a wad when someone who looked a little different than them wanted to use the same bathroom or drink out of a water fountain. So, mind you, it doesn't shock me that these low IQ, alt-right, whatever you want to call these loser morons, does not surprise me that they're this dumb with it. But let's get a little deeper into it. What else could we do? They could blow up a drone, unmanned, of course, make it a vessel, anywhere in the Cuban waters. We could arrange it to cause such an incident in the Havana, whatever has a spectacular of a Cuban attack from the air or sea, or even both. Why limit the president? Let's give him options. The presence of Cuban planes or ships merely investigating the intent of the vessel would be fairly compelling evidence that the ship was taken under attack. The nearness to Havana and Santiago would add credibility, especially to those people that might have heard the blast or have seen the fire. The U.S. could follow up with air and sea rescue operations covered by U.S. fighters to evacuate remaining members that don't exist of the non-existent crew. Let's read that sentence again. The U.S. then, to just really push it over the top, of course, we're going to have massive media coverage of this extraction mission. The U.S. could follow up with an air and sea rescue operation covered up by U.S. fighters to evacuate remaining members of the non-existent crew. This is just nonsense here. Casualties listed in U.S. newspapers. So we're talking about putting stuff in local papers, like, oh, so-and-so died, blah, 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 was such a good person. He served on this ship. Fake people. Didn't exist. Fake phone calls. Honey, I love you. This is the last crash ever. We're going to crash land in Pennsylvania. These attacks never happened, by the way. Sorry, this is a different thing. Sorry, mixing up my false flags. Classic me. No. These would be false messages and stuff we'd be putting in the paper to be like, oh, it's a shame that local kid died or whatever, that, kid from upstate died serving in the military because the Cubans shot him down, even though this was a non-existent crew. And the U.S. newspapers would then be controlled by the CIA and other media outlets that have CIA agents planted all throughout them to help pump these stories, fabricate these stories, and put out what do you call that when someone dies? What's it called? Dead person writing in, what's the name of that? What's the name of that shit? Obituary. There we are. Fake obituaries in local papers. Someone's probably screaming in their phone, it's wood. It's called obituaries, damn it. You dyslexic bastard. You know what I'm saying, though. Fake obituaries, they're at least pre-planning as far as the fact in advance to say, hey, to really, spark up the nation and send a wave across all, maybe the rural countryside, let's just have fake obituaries of people that didn't even exist in this non-existent crew. We could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area with other Florida cities, even Washington. The terror campaign would be pointed at Cuban refugees seeking haven in the United States. So they'd have Cuban refugees in the U.S., sink a boatload of Cubans en route to Florida. We could foster attempts on lives of Cuban refugees in the United States, exploding a few plastic bombs in carefully chosen spots, of course. We could arrest Cuban agents and release prepared documents substantiating Cuban involvement. That would also be helpful in projecting the idea of an irresponsible government in Cuba. Then again, perpetuating the fear of can't trust the communists, you don't want them near us. Cuban-based, Castro-supported, whatever. Use of MiG aircraft by U.S. pilots could provide additional provocation, harassment of civil air. Attacks on a surface shipping and destruction of U.S. military drone aircraft by MiG-type planes would be useful as these additional actions here. And F-86 properly painted. Okay, here's some, you want to talk about some deep shit that sounds awfully familiar, false flag-wise? An F-86 properly painted to convince air passengers that they saw a Cuban MiG, especially if the pilot of the transport were to announce such a fact. So somebody painted in a plane to look like a Cuban MiG, would then also be told to transmit such messages, positioning himself as a Cuban pilot. The primary drawback here is the suggestion would appear to be a security risk. The inherent in obtaining or modifying aircraft, however reasonable copies of the MiG could be produced. Hijacking attempts against civil air. Hijacking attempts against civil air. Hijacking attempts against civil aircraft and surface crafts should appear to continue as harassing measures condoned by the government of Cuba. Just blame it on the brown people across the body of water that our people have never interacted with and have maybe a different god or government or way of life. What did those people want to do? They wanted to nationalize oil. What did Castro want to do? He wanted to nationalize the farmland. He wanted to kick out all the illegal gambling rings and casinos, which the mobsters and gangsters and mafia were involved in. He wanted to give back farmland and strike down on these big tobacco companies and industries coming in and buying up plots of land. He wanted to stimulate the local economies and let local people buy. I'm not pro-Castro. I'm just saying what happened sounds a lot like what happened with nationalizing oil, the Mujahideen, training them to fight against the Soviets, arming them, CIA working with them. Now they have the CIA skills and tactics. Now they're not going to fight with you and agree with you anymore. Thanks for all the training and stuff. Now blah, blah, blah. Aren't those the people we put involved? Yes, yes, yes. Those are the people we're now going to condemn for the next 40 years. It's awfully interesting. Be painted and numbered as the exact duplicate of the civil registered aircraft belonging to the CIA proprietary organization in the Miami area. At a designated time, the duplicate would be then substituted for the actual civil aircraft. So, this is what I'm talking about here, where they'd fly the one up in the air, swap them out. Takeoff times of the drone aircraft and the actual aircraft will be scheduled to allow a rendezvous just south of Florida. From the rendezvous point, the passenger-carrying aircraft will descend to minimum altitude and go directly into an auxiliary field at Elgin AFB. I believe that's some Air Force base, where arrangements will have been made to evacuate the passengers and return the aircraft to its original status. I believe this was planned to maybe be some students going on a vacation of some kind. But here we have it, just to unpack what we just talked about here, what we just read. They're going to have one as a drone, one as a painted whatever. They're going to get this one at low altitude, land at an Air Force base. The drone aircraft would then take off and from the Air Force base, and it would then appear as if it were this civilian aircraft still flying in the air. The drone aircraft, meanwhile, will continue the flight and fly the field, continue the flight, like I was saying. When then getting over Cuba, the drone will begin transmitting on the international distress frequency, Mayday, Mayday, the Cubans are shooting us. Message stating that it's under attack by the Cuban MiG aircraft, which, by the way, we painted. And by the way, we would also prepare transmissions to act and position ourselves as Cubans. So it's not even a Cuban MiG operated by Cubans. It's a Cuban MiG painted by us to look like us, to be positioned as a Cuban pilot, which, by the way, it's just us doing this to our own people. The transmission will then be interrupted by destruction of the aircraft. So let's go back. We've got a drone aircraft that is taking the place of a civilian aircraft from an Air Force base just south of Florida. When then getting over Cuba, the drone will begin transmitting Mayday signals that the Cuban MiG aircraft, Cuban MiG, I think maybe is what they call it, is then going to send these Mayday missiles or messages saying, hey, these guys are going to shoot a missile at us and shoot us down. The Cubans are sending threat messages. We're doing this on an international water distress frequency thing. Anybody can hear this. And then the transmission will then be interrupted by what? None other than a destruction of the aircraft, which everybody is led to believe is a civilian aircraft. This will then allow the radio stations in the Western Hemisphere to tell the U.S. what has happened, instead of the U.S. trying to sell the incident. Sit with that for a second. So instead of trying to sell the incident, instead of trying to just put it in the papers and leave it up to us to get stirred over, let's put something that seems so real in front of their face that they have no choice but to accept it as fact. Their government's telling it, the local papers are telling them this, the major national news outlets are covering this. The military is involved. Civilians have been harmed. Instead of trying to sell this, let's just make it so believable that they'd be silly and, dare I say, anti-American to question that what happened to us was a terrorist attack. I mean, come on. If you're still buying the official story of 9/11 after parsing through this document of how we put together false flag operations, how we prepare these things, the depth of planning that goes on, reminding you the subject line of this is the justification for war in Cuba. And we have a fake terrorist attack on a fake drone staged as a civilian aircraft, which is being attacked by a fake Cuban MiG, which is painted up and rigged up to look as such. Now do you understand why I'm not going to vote for any of these people? Now do you understand why I'm not going to go wait in a line to be told some lie my whole life that, just because you're from a patch of dirt from over there and they speak a different language, they wear stuff on their head, they have a different God, let's just blame it on those guys. Let's just blame it on them, perpetuate the military-industrial complex, continue to fearmonger, divide internally, and perpetuate, the same people that knock these places down, build them back up and profit off of it. And we can get into that in different episodes, but holy shit, guys. I mean, I'm just going to end it here. I'm at about an hour. I think the goal here, too, is to leave a little bit of a thirst or interest for your guys' own interest to want to get into maybe a little bit more of the Kennedy assassination, false flag operations, what was Operation Northwoods. Hopefully, I gave you guys a little bit more of an understanding of what actually went into the planning here, why I'll never wait in a line for one of these AIPAC fucking backed bastards, and why maybe not everything is as it seems. And a lot of stuff is prepared, planned, and ultimately designed to make us feel a certain way and justify wars against brown people that speak different languages or have different cultural customs. Consider who you're voting for, consider why they're running, consider why the wars are happening, consider who benefits from them, guys. I'm not suicidal. I am not intending you to agree or disagree. Starting some conversations, point out some issues or some things that I might have missed in the comments, some things that you wish I would have gotten into a little bit deeper, some things that are maybe relevant and that potentially I glossed over and should have gotten into, or maybe things I was wrong about because I am dyslexic. I was sitting here and reading for an hour after all. So at the very least, I for sure mispronounced something. If you made it this far, I appreciate it, guys. Like, comment, subscribe, do all that jazz. Appreciate it. See you in the next one.